So then, good evening. Good evening. Yes. So maybe first I will, maybe not necessary to read the points in this order. So now, with the preliminaries as the basis, then training in the awakening mind, and this has two parts. Training in the ultimate bodhicitta and then conventional bodhicitta. So two parts. Then there is a difference in how in the order, how the sequence of these two awakening minds. Then there are two ways, right? There are two different orders there, and each order it has its own benefit, right? So Rinpoche's it is said that in the commentary by Horden Nangabel, mind training like the rays of the sun, then and also by Kyabje Babonga's commentary on the 7 point, then it is explained first training in the conventional bodhicitta and then ultimate bodhicitta. So this also has its benefit. The reason being that if you look in, it accords with the order of the 6 paramitas, with the 6 paramitas, right? Beginning with generosity and then ending with wisdom, right? With the perfection of wisdom. So according to that sequence, then this is why we have this order, we have this sequence, and beginning first with ultimate bodhicitta and then conventional bodhicitta, then it also has its own benefit. Why? Because I've heard from friends that in this sequence, if one was to train if one was to train directly with conventional bodhicitta, right, meditating on compassion and generating loving kindness, the practice of Tonglen, then there is a danger that one could be overwhelmed, right? One could be overwhelmed by this practice, by taking on the suffering of others, right? So, in this way, then, first meditating on ultimate bodhicitta, first meditating on emptiness, on Buddha nature, when one recognizes that, acknowledges that, and then tries to meditate on Tonglen practice, then one has a good basis there, right? So this helps in not becoming overwhelmed by taking on the suffering of others. So like this, then I was thinking, these two awakening minds, yes, when we are in front of the, the altar, and we are in our, on the cushion, and then meditating on these two bodhicittas, then it seems, everything seems all right, right? Everything seems okay. We think of emptiness as it is taught in the Heart Sutra, for example, and we try to stay on that point as much as possible. And then when it comes to conventional bodhicitta, then we try to generate compassion for others, right? And just as it is explained in the scriptures, in the Lamrim, for example, then going through those 6 causes, right? And going through those points, and then reflecting on those points, and then staying in contemplating those points, right? This is how one does it, So this is very nice, This is all very nice, but the challenge, I feel, the real challenge we face is when we are not in our altar, when we are not in the Lagang, when we are not in the meditation session, but it is when we are in the subsequent sessions or the post session, right? When we leave our home, or even our home, within our families and loved ones and so forth, with our fellow human beings, this is when we have to really try to bring our practice, this is when we have to try to bring the 2 awakening minds, 2 awakening minds. So then how do we do this? Then this is explained in the 3rd point, taking adverse conditions onto the path of enlightenment, right? So this is a very important point, I feel. So then how does one do that? Of course, when we are when we find ourselves in a challenging situation, somewhat difficult, being confronted with by a difficult person, this is really the perfect situation. This is really the perfect situation when we have to bring our practice. That's when we have to put those contemplations, which are, I feel, somewhat theoretical, right? There is a certain level of I think it's when we are simply trying to generate those minds, if we are simply aspiring for, if our meditation on conventional bodhicitta is purely aspirational, then it won't be of much benefit, right? So these unfavorable conditions presents us. It gives us an opportunity to then engage with our, to really engage with bodhicitta, to really bring our bodhicitta, and then to engage the situation at hand, right? So this is what we all have to try to do, to try to bring our meditation sessions to life. We have to do this, right? And so the first thing is seeing these unfavorable conditions as an opportunity, to test ourselves. I think this is a good way. It is helpful for me, right? And then also what is helpful is when we are confronted, then it is important to really try to not react negatively. This is very important. Why is this important? As with that teaching, the teaching of offering the victory to the other and taking on, is it defeat upon oneself, I feel that simply by not reacting in a negative manner, in a way, we are offering the victory to the other person. If we react negatively, we would be harming them, right? So simply not harming them when we are compelled to do so is a form of offering victory to the person. So this is just one way, I feel, of putting that teaching into practice, right? So then, then the question is, if I am confronted, there are many times when I'm confronted that I lose it, that I lose my cool, right? And I lose my temper and then react in a negative way. That has happened so many times for me, right? So then, how can I change that? This is the question that I think we usually ask, right? We are confronted in such situations, and usually the result is more or less similar, right? How we react is more or less similar. So then, how do we change that? For this, then, what I find personally useful is to simulate situations beforehand. This is, I think, helpful, so that when we get up in the morning, to accept that there is the possibility that we might find ourselves in a difficult circumstance. This is one thing. We have to think that this is possible, right? Not only is this a possibility, but the probability is quite high, So we can think like this, and then we think, if such a thing happens today, then I am prepared for my side. We have to tell ourselves. We have to tell ourselves this. We have to remind ourselves that I am prepared. And how so? Well, what I did in the meditation session, this is what is going to help me. All I need to do is I have to utilize them. All I need to do is I have to recognize that those meditative sessions were really meant to prepare me for such situations. We have to remind ourselves of the purpose of meditating on compassion, the meditating on patience, right? So, like this, just even though it is not so much, it is not so much in terms of as a realization or anything like that, but this is, I think, useful. It can prove useful. So this is one thing. And then, when we find ourselves confronted, then it is again important to think, to put ourselves in the other person's shoes, right? To think from that person's point of view, and to accept that perhaps, to think maybe the person is negative towards me because the person might have had a bad day, right? So to think from different angles, this is, I think, also useful. And not simply take it personally, The person could just be having a bad day, and unfortunately, you were there at the wrong time, and this is why I'm in this situation. So if we can approach difficult situations in this manner, then this is, I think, if we can approach it like this, then this helps in us not having that reaction, that we might have otherwise, right? So we have to prepare ourselves and really try to think from different viewpoints, from different viewpoints. This is always good, right? Okay. Yesterday, during our interaction, there was one question regarding Dharma, right? Regarding Dharma, right? Regarding Dharma. Dharma, it can have different meanings, right? In different contexts, on different levels, Dharma. On the one hand, Dharma can includes all phenomena. When we do this Om Sabhava Shuddha Sawa Dharma, right? So in that context, Dharma includes all phenomena. Anything that exists is Dharma, right? Acharya Vasubandhu then talks about the 10 different, what Dharma can mean on 10 different levels, right? Then we have Dharma as in the three jewels. As in the three jewels, we have Dharma, right? Dharma is one of the three jewels. So this Dharma is twofold. On the one hand, it is the realization of the meaning of the Buddha's scriptures. It is the realization of the Buddha's intent. This is one Dharma. And then through realizing the Buddha's intent, the Buddha's teachings, then we are able to overcome a block. We are able to overcome mental afflictions. We are able to overcome a negative quality of our mind, right? And this is what we call cessation, right? So cessation of mental delusions is the second type of Dharma, right? So in the context of the three jewels, then these two would be something like, I think, something like ultimate Dharma, and then conventional Dharma will of course be the Buddha's teachings, the Buddha's scriptures, right? So this is what we call conventional Dharma, right? And the realizations as a result of contemplating the Buddha's teachings, and then the peace that one comes to, that one experiences as a result of having realized the Buddha's scriptures is again the second type of ultimate Dharma. So then, as with the question yesterday, the simple act of practicing generosity, isn't that Dharma? That was, I think, the question, right? So then, again, if I say this is not Dharma per se in itself, this is not to say that that has no value. Something that's not Dharma, at least in this context, if it isn't a Dharma, by saying it is not a Dharma, it is not Dharma, does not devalue it. This is again one point. So I think like this. So, but then the practice of generosity, if it is done with the right intention, if it is done in order to realize the great teacher's intent, then of course this is an act of Dharma, because it accords with the Buddha's teachings, right? Because it plays a role in realizing the Buddha's teachings, because it brings us one step closer to enlightenment, right? If it is done with the right intention. The act of simply giving something, passing one object to another, one possession to one another, if that is done with not the correct intention, then it is simply an exchange of a good, right, of possessions. So then when we say generosity, then we have to again think of the intention, the motivation, why are we giving this away? Why, right? And this why is what it has a say, it has the final say in whether that action of giving the possession away, whether that becomes Dharma or not, right? And then yesterday, Tom, with your question, I think I have misunderstood your question. This afternoon, Derek, was kind enough to explain me and give the background. So, I think you mentioned the work, this organic, right? Organic farming. So at the time, I didn't really understand, what that was. So then this, how you said it to your friend, again, I think you said it with the best motivation, right? This is wonderful. When we try to practice the Dharma in our own ways, what we first have to acknowledge is that we are not perfect, right? This is important. When we try to practice the Dharma, we have to always acknowledge that what we are doing, we have to practice the Dharma to the best of our ability, but it won't be perfect, So this is important. When we do something, even if we do something in a positive way with the best intentions, there might be counterproductive results, right? Is that right? Counterproductive results, right? So we always have to keep that in mind. For example, our teaching, the teaching that we always hear, which is to not kill. So if we disengage from the act of killing, and if we take this practice to not, of not to kill, if we take this and make it very important in our practice, in our way of practicing the Buddha's teaching, if we take this and really make it very important in our application of the Dharma, then in such a situation where, for example, if in our house we have termite infestation, for example, right? If we are facing that, and if we are facing it on quite a big level, relatively speaking, right? So then what do we do? What do we do? Do we simply say, oh, the great Buddha said to not kill, so therefore I won't kill. I won't even disturb the termites. I will just let them do their work. I will just not disturb, whatever they are doing, which is of course building their home, right? In your home, right? So then, if we find ourselves in this situation, what will we do? This is one point, right? So, in a way, this act, this very strong commitment to not engage in the act of killing, or to not even engage in any action that might indirectly result, in the death of animals, right? If our commitment is so strong, then this is very good by itself. But if you bring it in this situation, then of course there is a counterproductive result, right? Pretty soon, if you just let the termites have their way, then your home could become the home of the termites, right? And pretty soon, the termites might say, well, since this is our home, it's time you have to move out, right? So then what do we do in that situation? Definitely, we have to try to look for any solutions to not kill them, preferably trying to move them somewhere, but then where? Right? We cannot say, okay, I'm going to move you all, okay, you can now, this is your new home, and you move them to your neighbor's yard. Again, is this a good solution? Obviously it's not. So then, how do we practice the Dharma in that situation? Because I heard this story, I heard of this case here before, right? And this is not easy, The theory of not killing is one thing, but then the application of that, depending on the situation, then this can really vary, the level of application, right? So this is just something that I wanted to share. Okay, so I think this is good. So at this point, then please feel free to share anything. If you have some doubts, I would really appreciate if you voice your doubts. I find that very helpful. When people ask questions or share their views, for me, that is very helpful. And also, I think for us, this really will bring much benefit. So, shall we do that?
Anyone? Okay, Joel. Tashi Dele Rinpoche. I have a question in regards to what you shared yesterday about compassion and empathy, which in some cases it may lead to depression. I think for my case, especially for me, sometimes I feel like I'm over-empathized in a way that that feeling I feel can become very intense. So in a way it becomes like afflictions because it disturbs our mind, right? So if compassion is actually empathy with reasonings, so my question is, how do we contemplate our reasons so that empathy actually works for us rather than against us? Yeah, thank you, Rinpoche.
Oh, thank you, thank you. I think what this way I feel is also good. When we try to cultivate compassion for others, I think it is important that we should also include ourselves, right? It's important that we also include ourselves in our compassion. What I mean to say is that first, what is compassion? Compassion is wishing others to be free from suffering. The scriptures are very clear on that. Secondly, what do we mean by suffering? So, different levels of suffering, therefore different types of compassion. If in the context of practicing the Dharma, at least in the context of, I think, in the context of the person of the middling capacity, then when we wish others to be free from suffering, then we are wishing the others to be free from the subtle suffering, right? From samsara, from cyclic existence. With this kind of compassion, I don't know if this compassion can really depress us. I'm curious. If we are having compassion for someone and we are wishing them to be free from, a painful sensation, an unpleasant situation, conventional suffering, let's just call it that, when we think so much of this, then I think it is more likely that we could experience stress ourselves. But if we think about subtle suffering and then wish others to be free from this subtle suffering, then I think I like to think that this would not result in depression. This maybe a distinction could be made there. But having said that, how to not over-empathize? So when we become depressed, then it is clear that we are identifying too much with the person. We are really taking on their suffering now, right? We are really taking on their suffering. So then the question is whether should we stop doing that? Should we stop taking on the suffering of others? Because if you do that, then it saddens me to the point of depression, right? But then if I stop taking the suffering of others, then am I not doing away with the practice of Tonglen? Right? Am I not? How can you practice Tonglen how can you practice the practice of giving and taking without taking? Right? Then there's that question. So with this, then we have to, I think, find the middle way, right? We have to find something like, we have to find a compromise. And this compromise is that, of course, we do not stop with the practice of giving and taking. We do not stop with the practice of generating love and compassion. We do not do that, right? We have to continue doing that. But what would be a good thing is if we feel that we are emphasizing this taking part too much, then maybe it would be a good idea to alternate between not only just taking on the suffering of others, but we can alternate between taking and giving. Yeah? So it's not only taking, but also we have the practice of giving, right? So alternating between these two, it gives us it gives us an opportunity to not overwhelm ourselves simply by only taking on the suffering of others. But we take a rest and then we concentrate and look at the goodness in us, the good qualities that we have, right? What we call the seeds of virtue of the 3 times, right? And then concentrate and then to visualize that we are sending this to others, that we are sharing this with others. So if we divert ourselves from simply contemplating suffering and then think more about our positive qualities and wishing and then imagining sharing these qualities with others, then I think we are in a way giving our mind a rest, giving our mind a rest from always thinking on suffering, right? And you're right, this is why I think most of us, we don't want to think about suffering too much, because by definition, if we think of suffering too much, of course, we will not, it is not pleasant. It is not, right? So we have to maintain this healthy balance, between cultivating love, which is wishing others to be happy, and then compassion, which is wishing others to be free from suffering. So we have to find this, we have to really maintain this balance, With one meditation, it's somewhat more negative. It has a more negative approach. Compassion has a more negative approach. The meditation, the cultivation of love has a more positive approach, right? Which is about sharing goodness, sharing one's good qualities with others, and then compassion, which is taking on the negative aspect of others upon oneself, right? So like this, then I think we have to try, we have to try. So with the first version of answers that I gave before, I think that was all nonsense. So I think with the second, at least this is a good theory. It seems more sound, right? But now the challenge for us is now we have to implement that and see for ourselves whether that could help or not. So we have to try like this. Thank you.
There's a second floor question from the second floor.
Mm-hmm.
Lillian.
Good evening, Rinpoche. We have a question here from a devotee. Could Rinpoche please explain the differences between conventional and ultimate bodhicitta? Thank you.
Conventional and ultimate bodhicitta. I will try. Conventional bodhicitta is the spontaneous wish to attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. This is coming just like from my head now. It's like so easy, huh? It's so easy, right? But of course it's not easy. When the key word here I think is spontaneous, right? So wishing for Buddhahood for the purpose of alleviating the suffering of all mother sentient beings. And not simply wishing, but having spontaneity in wishing, right? Developing. So this needs to be spontaneous, a spontaneous arising, right? And this has to be, of course, done in this order, whether be it through the 7 cause and effect method or by way of exchanging oneself with others, right? So there are 2 methods, right? So one has to train following these approaches, yeah? And through perseverance, then gradually this wish, which we might have had, but it is only for a short time, and then we lose inspiration, and then we are not motivated anymore. But we have to go back to all those points and constantly remind ourselves and constantly engage in those points. And only by engaging on those points that are explained in these 2 approaches, in these 2 traditions, are then we able to have this spontaneous altruistic intention, right? So that's conventional bodhicitta. And then ultimate bodhicitta is when we realize emptiness, right? And not conceptually, so I'm not talking about having a general understanding or a correct understanding or correctly conceptualizing emptiness, the nature of phenomena. Not simply having a good understanding. Simply having a good understanding is not enough, right? So then, by simply conceptualizing emptiness, it can only go too far. We are still limited. Our thoughts, our conceptual thoughts, are still pulling us back to samsaric thoughts and so forth. So, again, to develop our theory of emptiness even further, And by utilizing shamatha and vipassana, these are the two main tools that we have to use in order to deepen our understanding of emptiness, right? And by meditating on shamatha and vipassana and applying that to our understanding of emptiness, are we then able to break through from this conceptualization of emptiness. And then we are then able to truly realize emptiness non-conceptually, right? With this level of knowing, of grasping, of experiencing emptiness, then we have freed ourselves from dualistic thoughts. In that realization of emptiness, in that experience of emptiness, then there are no dualism there. On our current level, on the conceptual level, on the conceptual thought level, then we are always affected by dualistic appearance, right? So this is why ultimate bodhicitta is so important. Without ultimate bodhicitta, then there is no way that the wish of conventional bodhicitta can be realized, can be fulfilled. Without ultimate bodhicitta, then there is really no way, right? So I think this is why we always talk of the method and the wisdom. The method and the wisdom. And each of these two aspects of the path to the full enlightenment, each of these paths, they are indispensable to each other. Having one is not good enough, right? As Chandrakirti in entering the middle way, gives this example of how the bird needs two wings to cross the ocean, right? So similarly, then we have to rely on these two aspects of the path, conventional bodhicitta and ultimate bodhicitta. So like this. Thank you.
Thank you, Rinpoche.
Rinpoche, hello.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, two questions. First, what is the difference between, how do we differentiate between self-care and self-cherishing? Question number two, what is a quick and smart way to do a self-check as to when we are so-called helping others, we are doing it really for others, or we are doing it so that other people like us?
Yeah, yes. Oh, thank you. So I think your first question was, what is the difference between self-cherishing and self-care, right?
Yes.
Okay. In some translations, then I see this word, self-cherishing mind, and then cherishing others. So in this way of using these two terms, self-cherishing and cherishing others, yeah? This is very interesting how we use these terms, but if we are not careful, if we think that cherishing others means to neglect our own needs, our own wishes, then I think in some situations then this can be detrimental, right? This can be this can hold us back, you know, especially when we are beginning, you know, especially when we are beginning. I think in some cases, if the practitioner is highly skilled, highly realized, then this is okay. But for us beginners, then we always have to practice in a way, practice the Bodhisattva, you know, try to follow the Bodhisattva's way of life, the Bodhisattva's way of practice, according to our capacity. According to our capacity. This is important. So what is clear now is that we have to cherish ourselves, but then we should not neglect others. And we should cherish others, but not neglect ourselves. This is, I think, really the best way, at least in my case, right? To try to be inclusive. I think this is really the key point in when we talk about Bodhisattva's practice, right? What would a Bodhisattva do? A Bodhisattva will always take an inclusive path, an inclusive approach, right? At least for me, if one was to completely neglect one's own wishes, then this is not healthy, you know, not healthy. So self-care, self-cherishing, both should be, we should practice both. You know, we should practice caring for ourselves and of course cherishing ourselves. But is that all there is to it? Of course not. Then we have to again go beyond ourselves and then think about others. And also, just as, remember, you know, I think in the Bodhisattva's way of life, I think there is one statement where it says, because I wish to be happy, therefore I should wish others to be happy, right? And if we don't have any care for ourselves, if we don't have the slightest care for ourselves, if we do not cherish or rejoice or appreciate anything that we do, any qualities that we have, if we do not do that, then how can we cherish others? Where is our basis? If we can still do that, then I think you have attained a very high level. You know, if you can still do that, then the situation should be that you were born like this, right? Otherwise, where is the basis, right? As you had explained before, empathy, right? So to empathize with someone, we have to again have that similar wish, right? We have to also to empathize with someone who is in an unpleasant situation. We likewise need to have the same feeling, you know, that we should also have the wish to be free from this unpleasant situation. Otherwise, we cannot empathize, right? So, with this way, then definitely we have to maintain again this healthy balance between cherishing ourselves and cherishing others, right? And in the great, teachings of the Buddha, which explain what a highly realized bodhisattva would do in a given situation, when we see those, it's aspiring, right? But can we engage just like those bodhisattvas? This is the question that we have to ask ourselves. Are we ready to do that, And if we are not ready, that's fine. That's fine. The more important thing is even aspiring in the Bodhisattva's way of life is good enough. If you think about it, in this world, in today's world, how many people are there that really aspires a Bodhisattva's way of life, that appreciates, the good deeds of the Bodhisattvas, right? So rejoice. We have to really rejoice about the fact that we at least are as aspirants.
Aspiring.
Yes, that we are at least aspiring, at the very least, and that not only are we aspiring, but we are also engaging according to our capacity, So this is just something that I feel we have to recognize, yet at the same time not become egoistic, right? So again, it's all about maintaining a balance, because there's always the positive side and the negative side, the positive side and the negative side, and this seems to really extend in so many different situations, on so many different challenging situations. There are always these two things that we have to try to balance, try to bring together, and how these two sides can be harmonious, right? How can we maintain this harmony between these two sides? And this might be then leading to your second question, is how do we know whether we are trying to benefit someone or whether we are really trying to make ourselves happy, whether we are trying to make other people like us, right? This is very good. So we always talk about this, whether an act was selfish or not, selfish and non-selfish acts. Going into these finer details is very difficult. Why? Because we are dealing with our mind. These are mental aspects, right? Am I aware of everything that is currently on my mind? Am I aware of all the thoughts that is arising in my mind? Can I keep a track of all the thoughts that I have? Of course not. So then can I keep a track of the selfish thoughts, right? This is, I think, quite a challenge, keeping tracks of our thoughts. This is a challenge. On these very subtle levels, I think it is even a bigger challenge But then, on a more manageable level, then we can, in a way, keep track of our thoughts. And how can we do that? We can, to a certain degree, we can keep track of our thoughts by keeping track of our speech, what we say, right? What we say after we do something. Do we talk about our good actions? We have to think. After doing a good work, after completing a virtuous karma, what are we dedicating it to? If we do something good, but if we do not dedicate it, then there is the likelihood that we are simply doing it for our own good. So dedication is therefore not only important, but it also plays this role as a reminder. Dedication plays this role as a reminder, and it helps us in getting a better grasp of what we had done before and why we did it before, right? Whatever that we have, whatever good karma that we have committed, right? So I think first the intention, and then the actual action, and then finally the dedication. These three are so important, right? These three are so important. So, like this. But then the subtle selfish thoughts is something that at the beginner level, I think maybe we don't deal with it so much. At least we should try to, where it's really obvious, then we have to work on those situations. For example, like I said before, if we find ourselves talking and in a way boasting to others of the good work that we have done, then we have to really use that. Self-reflection. This is what we have to do from time to time. Without self-reflection, how can we be sure whether we did it with a good motivation or not, right? So take some time off to look at yourself as a third person. If I talk like this, how would a third person see this? Or if someone talks like this, in this way, how would I perceive the person, right? This can also help. Again, it's a different perspective. Perspective is so important, right? Having perspective and being able to look at yourself from a third person's perspective, I think is really wonderful. And this is, again, as we talked about yesterday, one of our greatest gifts as a human being is that we can try to look at ourselves from a third person's point of view. So we have to, again, go there. We have to go there time to time, and then check our motivations, check our actions, and then you're right, while you ask these questions, this is so important because it can be a seemingly minor an action of perhaps not much significance, right? The action itself can be just a little thing. But if done with the best intention and dedicating it to the highest extent, then this action has so much potential, right? So I really appreciate the question. So thank you. Yeah. Oh.
Thank you, Rinpoche, for the teaching. I have a question.
Please. Oh, sorry. Yes. Yes.
My question is, maybe I backtrack a little bit because you talked a few sessions ago about the mind of purity. And could Rinpoche elaborate on this mind of purity and how do we develop this mind of purity and how do we motivate ourselves to constantly engage in this mind of purity? Thank you, Rinpoche.
Oh, yes. I think you were referring to that. There was one question, and then I think I said something like pure mind, right? Oh, okay. So, pure mind, the purity at that, I think it was the question was asked in relating to how one develops the relationship between the student and the teacher, right? And then I think I just said pure mind. We need that, right? So, did I understood your question? Okay. So how do we develop a pure mind, right? Pure mind is by doing any action with the best intention and doing it really for the benefit of the other person, maybe I'm thinking of too many different situations. Maybe like this. A pure mind is a mind that is not spoiled by delusions, right? This is it. This is what pure mind is. A mind without delusions, without expectations. Because many times whenever we do something, we have expectations, right? We of course wish for, a bodhisattva wishes for enlightenment, but this is not what I meant. Expectation is for oneself. The bodhisattva yearns for enlightenment, but this is not for the bodhisattva's sake, right? It is for the sake of others, even though the bodhisattva wishes for it. So, pure mind, then we have to perhaps in different contexts, maybe what I find useful is perhaps this. Since we are trying our best to practice, we aspire for the same qualities as the Buddha. We try to follow his teachings, right? And we want to practice. Okay, what do you want to practice? Right? What do you want to practice? And ask ourselves, what is it that is holding us back. That is holding me back in my practice. Right? What is a thing that I should be concentrating on now in relation to my practice, in relation to developing my mind? There is something there, right? So, after making this clear, when this becomes clear to our mind, then if we are able to free our mind from whatever it is that is obstructing our practice, if we are able to free ourselves from that, this is when I think our mind becomes pure. Right? So this is one level. So I'm trying to be specific, right? So we have to be specific. So that, and also the good thing that if we call that's purity for now, then I think it is somewhat encouraging. If we say, pure mind is like the Buddha's mind, then there is this distance feeling. We are so far away from achieving that, right? But we have to see and we have to apply the teachings to ourselves, to our situations, right? And if there isn't anything that we find unpleasant or we find challenging, then why are we in the Dharma? We wouldn't be here today because we find challenges. This is why we are here trying to practice the Dharma, right? So whatever it is that is challenging us the most, that is holding back us right now, right here, right now, this time, if we are able to free ourselves from that challenge by practicing what the Buddha taught, by following his advice, then we gain a certain level of purity, right? And we can use that we can use that as a basis for furthering our development. So like this, I think. Thank you. Okay, thank you. Oh. This is really good.
Rinpoche 啊，我要问你一个问题哈，我看着不懂对不对啊？因为我一直在想哦，昨天想整天想说，Rinpoche 讲的是修心去意哈，那跟去因果的修心法，去因果修心法一样吗？哈，去因果修心法。去因果修心法，对，去因果修心法一样吗？去因果修心法是讲说知母啊，认知一切有情是我们的母亲哦，是知母啊，念恩呐，念恩报恩这些啦，这也是修心法啦，也是修悲心哦，一样吗？抱歉，你跟我讲一下，谢谢。
Rinpoche, her question is to ask that she said she has been thinking whole day yesterday that about Rinpoche's teachings on the 7 points on mind training, and also mind training, but that there's 6 causes and 1 effect. Yeah, are these 2 mind training the same or different? Because the second mind training 6 causes and it to 1 effect, that is meditating on that all sentient beings have been our mother, and then to remember the kindness of our mother, and then the thought to repay their kindness. So she thinks both are my training. Then are these two my trainings the same or different?
Okay, so if I remember it correctly, then these two traditions, these two approaches, the 7 point, is it the 7 cause and effect approach, and then exchanging self with the other approach, from the 4th cause, then it is the same, right? From the 4th cause and onwards, it is the same. So it seems that the first 3 causes, and then the exchanging oneself with others, these 2 methods are 2 different approaches to getting to cause number 4, which is loving kindness, right? So these 2, a person, for a certain type of practitioner, then using, recognition that all beings, recognizing all beings as one mothers, and then contemplating their kindness when they were our mothers, and then developing the wish to repaying that kindness. These 3 are very effective in generating loving kindness towards others. For the second type of person, then it is not necessarily that by relying on these first 3 steps, but going right into exchanging the self with others through this method, then one is able to cultivate loving kindness towards others, right? Correct me if I remember this, if I was wrong. So when we say mind training, lojong, again, lojong simply means mind training, training the mind, right? So if you, on the one hand, then you could say all forms of practicing the Dharma, putting the Buddha's teachings into practice, is a form of training the mind. On the one hand, it can be understood like this, right? But here, with this Tibetan word lojong, and which is then being used in a very specific context. And what is this context? It's only used in the context of generating conventional bodhicitta, mainly by way of exchanging the self with the other method, right? So this is what we mean when we say the lojong practice, right? The lojong genre, right? These teachings. So this is, I think, what we mean, when we say mind training. Yeah. Thank you.
Greetings from upstairs, Rinpoche.
Okay, upstairs.
Thank you for your teaching, Rinpoche. One question. It seems like minds are getting weaker nowadays, with kids killing themselves, engaging in acts of self-harm. My question is, what is the issue here? What is the problem, do you think, is causing all this? And how can we raise a generation of kids that are more resilient, with stronger mind, bigger hearts? Thank you.
Could you please paraphrase?
I mean, nowadays kids are very weak in mind. Yeah, they are more prone to killing themselves.
Okay.
Yeah.
Suicide.
So my question is, why is that so? And how can we teach the younger kids to be stronger in the mind and have a bigger heart, not be so selfish? Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, thank you. This is a very important issue that we have to look into, you know. With technology, you know, with information in our palms, with social networking, with these really are, they can really empower us. You know? They can really empower our development. But then they also have this counterproductive aspect. That is, that this can be also misused in simply having a good time or preventing boredom in some cases. And especially I think with social networking, this can really be used for self-gratification, right? And with technology, you can make everything instant, you know. If you want something, you can get it, you know, very quickly, instantly, right? In many cases, right? And technology is the medium for that, you know. It provides us this luxury, right? And our new generation are brought up in this world which functions like this. And then I feel in many cases parents are very busy. Yeah? They have to work because the whole system is built in a way that if you don't work, it's how can you survive? For many people, this is the situation, right? So the parents have to work and they don't get to spend so much time with the children. And when they do get together, then of course you all know that people tend to get, they're on their phones, right? So there's not much interaction there. Or they may watch, or it used to be that they used to watch a movie together, which is I think better than being on phones individually. But then back in the olden days, instead of watching TV as a family, you would get together on the dinner table and then converse, you know, talk and share experiences, right? And then our grandparents then would tell stories of the villages, how life was back then, right? So really there was much, in a way we received so much transmission, like oral transmission from our grandparents, you know? Yeah, really. This is how I think how most of us were raised, you know. But nowadays, the new generation, they are in a different situation, and I think this is where the problem lies, you know, that with technology, then it is being misused for the sole purpose of providing self-gratification. And with this, if you are not careful, and then when you couple this powerful device in your hand, and if you couple that with, you know, the people out there who are trying to attract, who are trying to capitalize on this piece of technology by selling an idea, by selling happiness, by selling goodness, success, whatever. They use this as a medium, right? So like this, then I think, of course, the result that we have, it's not a surprise. Because all these things that we see in the media, they fuel our desire. They fuel our ego. If these social networking sites, they are customizable, right? So we can listen to only the news that we want to hear, and then avoid the other things that we don't want to hear. Back in the old days, when you watch TV, you had to watch everything, right? So you had to, there's at least some perspective. Nowadays, with social networking sites, you can customize your feeds, right? So you only are exposed to one side, right? And then when you can customize so that everything is pleasant and nice, then this is isn't it so wonderful, right? That you can go into this world where you can only hear good things and see pleasant things, right? And if you are exposed like this, 1 day, 2 days, weeks, months and years, this is like mind training. This is like lojong, right? But mind training one's mind to become more self-centered, to be more selfish, to be more gratified, instantly. And when young people are being brought up like this, then this is really setting the stage for disaster, you know, when these young people when they face an unfavorable condition, then they don't know how to deal with that, right? Because the parents have no time for them, and they're left with this device that has no regulation. They themselves are the regulators, right? So like this, then this is really something that we should be careful about, you know. Those of us who have a family, then I feel it is so important that when you get together, there should be a time when not only the children, but also the parents have to be offline, you know, be offline, and then spend time together as a family. Because if you don't do that, and if you give in as a parent, if you give in to this easy way out of dealing with your children, then there will be consequences down the road. And as a parent, you will be the second person who will have to suffer. The first, of course, the children themselves, right? So this is really, you know, I think being a parent in this 21st century world really calls for much responsibility, you know. It's much more challenging to be a parent in this time than being a parent 100 years back when we were all living in our villages, you know. So we have to then deal on this level, you know, and then really try to impart, you know, the wisdom from the previous generation. You know, the parents have to impart the wisdom that they had received from the grandparents onto the children, onto the new generation. It can be educational, it can be about culture. There are so many things that that are essential in our survival as a society, as a people, you know. So we really have to impart that. Is this the right word, impart? Okay. So, thank you. This is very practical. And I think for now, I think this is, a good time to dedicate, right?